Hello, and welcome to the Disability Myth. My name is Dominic, and I live with a fatal disease called spinal muscular atrophy. Together, my amazing caretaker, co-host, and best friend, Uriel, and I plan to debunk misconceptions, share our personal experiences, and shatter your expectations. But we're not stopping there. We're bringing in experts, thought leaders, and everyday people who are smashing through societal barriers, paving the way for a more inclusive world. Whether you're tuning in to learn, empathize, or simply to be entertained, the show promises to be an eye-opening experience that transcends boundaries. Because when it comes down to it, what makes us different is what makes us extraordinary.
Thank you, folks. Thanks for coming out on a Sunday. I really appreciate it. It's always a real compliment when people get away from their home on a Sunday afternoon. So thank you. This is Cultural Sundays. And we have, this week, with a talk called State of the Disabled Union, we are welcoming the return of Dominic and Uriel. Dominic spoke 2 years ago on the inaugural series of Cultural Sundays, and everybody loved it. So we've invited him back. And since then, I won't talk too much about it, but they've got their own podcast, and they've been interviewing a lot of people about disabilities, and they're going to talk a bit about that now. So round of applause, folks, please.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you for that awesome intro. Hello, how you doing tonight, buddy?
Oh, fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's just another podcast episode we're doing.
I think so.
Just in front of a live audience.
That's fun.
So with that being said, if you know, you know. Welcome back to another episode of The Disability Myth.
With?
I am, of course, your handsome, your humble, your handy host, Dominic Trevathan.
And Uriel, hi. It's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Yeah, so as Anne mentioned, we're excited to kind of share our findings as podcast owners. We've learned a lot over the past year of our podcast adventure, and just given my experience living with spinal muscular atrophy and Uriel's experience being my friend and also my caretaker, we're really excited to jump into this special kind of quote-unquote podcast episode, and we're thankful to have you all here.
It's actually been exactly 1 year, correct?
Yeah, it's been exactly 1 year since we started the podcast, The Disability Myth, and I think we've put out about 26 episodes now, majority of which we've interviewed people just all over the spectrum of disability, and even those without, noticeable disabilities. So we're excited to get into all that, and just to kind of get us all a little bit more familiar with each other. I see a lot of familiar faces, of course, but for those that may not be so familiar with us, you might be asking, who are we? And simply put, we're best friends. We first kind of met each other, I'd say about 11 years ago.
Going on 12 in high school.
Going on 12, yeah. We had our first real interaction, I'd say in junior year?
Yeah, I remember because I had an off period. I believe I was doing the Hancock government course. And that's a terrible thing to give a high schooler, an off period.
Yep.
So as an upperclassman, I would just visit other classrooms, and I would visit Dominic and also we had mutual friends in the same class, I believe. It was multimedia?
Yeah, I was in multimedia. That's the core memory. I was in multimedia class, and I was sitting with a couple of our mutual friends in the front. Uriel comes in. It's not his class. He just shows up, sits next to me. He firmly touches my knee, and he's like, "Hey, yo, can you feel that?" And I'm like, "Well, shit, at least take me out to dinner first." So it's been a loving friendship ever since, right, buddy?
He indeed did feel it.
I indeed did feel it, contrary to popular belief. Yes. So yeah, we've known each other ever since. A lot of our relationship has been hanging out. Our foundation of our friendship is honestly pizza rolls. We would hang out at my house. My amazing grandmother would cook us up some pizza rolls, and we'd hang out, play some video games.
Grilled cheese.
Grilled cheese. Yeah, you can't forget the foundations, the fundamentals of all friendships. And so just to kind of add on to our relationship, though, more recently, we've become sort of boss and employee. That's been added to our relational dynamic.
Yeah, take a guess. Who's
Yeah.
the boss and who's the employee?
Yeah, who's taller? Who's taller? Who wears the sweatpants? Yeah, so about 2 years ago, back in 2022, my grandmother unfortunately was hospitalized for about 5 months and was dealing with a staph infection, and so she is really an integral part of my care team. As an individual living with spinal muscular atrophy, I require 24/7 nursing care, and a lot of what's involved in my care is hooking me up to my ventilator, making sure it's working correctly, making sure I'm getting suctioned when I'm too congested to cough it out myself, helping feed me. I practically need help with all activities of daily living. And so, as you can imagine, when there's someone handling so much of your life and they're just, practically gone, it leaves a big hole in your care team, and that's what happened to me. And thankfully, one of the first people I contacted was Uriel, and he answered and said, "Hey, this is what's going on, and I could really use just if you can stay overnight, make sure I'm okay, help me get in and out of bed. You don't have to do too much this first time, just you can take it easy, I can ease you into my routine." And slowly but surely, he kind of picked up my care routine. We took baby steps, built our way up to using the bathroom together, of course. That's always fun with your best friend. But yeah, anything else you want to add to that beautiful love story, buddy?
No, I think you summarized it beautifully. That's indeed what happened. And also at the time, I wanted to leave my other job because it sucked.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the first night he came over to help me, and my grandfather was there, and he was helping transfer me to get me in bed. But we were showing Uriel so he could eventually do it himself. So my grandfather was getting me in bed, blah blah blah, and then I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go pee now," and let's get a little uncomfortable. I use a urinal, and that's how I go pee. And so Uriel said, "Please don't make me help you go pee." But we've gotten there.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, being friends, being kind of in this working relationship, he's now my IHSS caretaker. And it was about a month or two into him just helping me out of the kindness of his heart that we got him signed up with IHSS as well as myself. And it's worked out very, very well so far.
And they had back pay.
Back pay, yeah. So he was able to get paid for all the time that he kind of just helped me out to help me out. And yeah, it's worked out really well so far. And I'd say these are kind of the two main components of our relationship, right? Just that boss-employee, provider-recipient dynamic on top of the friendship. As you can imagine, it can get a little complicated when someone so close to you is also intimately providing care for you. And yeah.
We make it work. Yeah, communication.
Great communication. That's my major, so it's helped me out a lot. And yeah, it's been awesome on this kind of journey of being friends and being boss and employee. We've also become the hosts of our podcast, of course, The Disability Myth. And this podcast was really heavily influenced by my educational background as well as my disability, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, also because you had graduated with a communication degree and you wanted to use it for something, and then we were spending so much time together.
Yeah.
Did you originally pitch the idea to me, and then you just kind of...
Yeah, I had the fortune of getting to meet with the TEDx Santa Barbara host, and he gave me some really sound advice, and I told him, I want to get into public speaking. This is what I want to do. And he told me, well, you don't have to wait for somebody to ask you to speak. You can speak right now. You have a phone. You have the technology. So go out and start your own podcast. And that's what I did. And at first it was just going to be my own thing, but being the scaredy cat I am, I asked Udi if he would mind being my co-host, and kind of just figured he would, be a nice addition. I'm a little more on the straight and narrow. He's a little bit of a goofball, so it's a nice yin and yang. But yeah, the communication studies bachelor's degree I got from Arizona State about a year ago was a big reason why I started this as well, because I wanted to put that to use and really start branching out, searching what I want to do besides speaking and kind of forge my path, right, as an individual. And it's led me to this podcast, and we've had this just crazy pleasure to speak to a wide variety of people from all different backgrounds, all different abilities. This season alone, we've spoken with the lead singer of a punk rock band who also lives with spinal muscular atrophy. We've spoken with the founder of an app that's been published in the New York press. And we've spoken to an engineer who's overcome brain cancer.
Oh, and Skylar, the Wikipedia admin.
And a Wikipedia admin who happens to be blind, yes.
A local gentleman worked with Braille Institute, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, so we've had a lot of just really cool people that we've gotten in touch with because of this podcast. And all this to say that we've gathered a lot of information. We've heard a lot of stories. By no means are we experts. I'm obviously no president of the Disabled Union, and I don't think my friend here is either. But we're happy to kind of have this space to share our experiences, to share those experiences of those in the community, and really kind of work to bridge that gap in understanding between the disabled and the non-disabled experience. And so before we get too deep into it, we'll play you a little clip of our podcast so you can get an idea of how it goes and what it's like. I am, of course, your handsome, your humble,
Uriel
host.
and Dominic.
If I was in this situation where somebody asked me who I would want to survive with, the zombie apocalypse, my first name
Don't pick me, bro. Don't pick me.
I don't know if you're excited or speaking French or what.
Uh-huh.
I
am.
think I am.
I'm proud I am. I like how we all know the lyrics. SMA and boats. How does that go?
SMA and boats.
Yeah.
And then the rocky situation.
Yeah, go
And then
ahead.
the body just like bumps their own like sad girl music.
Yeah, hey.
Yeah, dude, you gotta get it in there at some point.
Yeah, so it's not even just the basics of how to use the clean, but also planning routes most efficiently and like figuring out which landmarks and dangers there are.
Gotta figure out the meta. That's cool.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
It's cool. I mean, that's why I like this show. It's the stuff like that. It just
It just gives the interesting nerds like us. So that's our little shameless plug. Feel free to check us out everywhere you find podcasts. And now that you have a kind of better idea of who we are, we'll get into the current state of the Disabled Union.
Title brought to you by Anne.
By Anne. Anne is awesome. She came up with this kind of idea for this presentation. And
I came up with the idea.
Yeah.
You came up with a name, and I thought it was a really good name actually. Because I'm English, and I'm like, what? Oh yeah, I think I've heard of this.
Yeah, it was. I think it was right around the last time of the State of the Union, and we kind of just took the idea and we ran with it. And yeah, I'll let you kind of break down how we split this up.
Well, it took us, when Anne first told us about it, it took us probably a month or two of brainstorming, and we kept, because living with a disability is very broad, and we had to keep chipping at it, and we ended up with three major points here that we believe are the most common, or the most brought up, points for those living with disabilities.
Yep. So here we have, as you can see, we're going to kind of get into aspects regarding healthcare, managing your care staff. That's a really common issue, specifically for individuals such as myself, probably for a lot of other wheelchair users as well. Navigating the relationships you have with your care staff, as well as just getting care and maintaining your care. We also want to jump into some aspects of what it's like to live with a disability financially, some of the struggles that we may go through, the challenges that we may face others who don't live with a disability you don't have to worry about. And of course we want to get into social aspects, because something that I think I've kind of taken away from putting this whole presentation together is there's a lot of flaws in the current state of the disabled union. There's a lot of good things, but there's a lot of flaws. And the only way we can really show the flaws and give society a reason to change and improve upon these current systems is by being out there and being social and showing the world, that we exist, that we struggle, but that we exist, right? And so with that being said, we'll kind of jump into our healthcare aspects. So we have a little clip here from the podcast, episode 4 of season 1. We were fortunate enough to have a really good friend of ours on the program. Her name is Chelsea Furyk, and she is a psychology grad student at San Diego State University. And in this clip here, she's going to be talking about navigating some of her relationships after she returned home from her spinal cord injury rehab experience. And so she'll be talking about, the nuances of dealing with her care with family versus getting cared for by, essentially complete strangers. And the fact of the matter here is that a lot of people in the disability community rely on the help of others, whether it's direct or indirect. And when you rely on caregiving to the extent that I do, as well as a lot of others in the community do, you have to kind of come to the conclusion that being cared for is intimate. It's an intimate phenomenon. And, it's interesting, like we touched on earlier, me and Uriel, we were already friends when he started working for me. And when he did start working for me, our friendship, I won't say completely changed, but the relationship deepened, I'd say, right?
I agree, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll stop blabbing, we'll give Chelsea her little spotlight here, and yeah.
Yeah, after I got out of the hospital, my life just completely took a turn and was, just insanely different from the life I was living before. After time, there was kind of that burnout with my family members, and so that's when I was looking into different agencies and stuff, and I got connected with IHSS. And so I want to say about 2 months after I had been home and my family members were taking care of me, that's when I hired my first outside caregiver. And that went really well for quite a while. And then I ended up hiring another outside caregiver for the night shift, which was about right after that, 5 to 10, 5 to 9, just to help with all my evening care and things like that. And so that was a huge shift and very different from me because I had never, had anybody take care of me before, but there was just a different dynamic between a family member helping out and an outside caregiver stranger helping out. With my experience, I noticed with family, it's actually a lot more challenging in many different ways because of that relationship. With that family member, it shifts a lot. So it's not like that person's not only my cousin who loves me now, it's my cousin who is, all up in my space. The care that I need is very intimate and is very close and just the different things that I have to do. So it's a huge shift. It's a big change in my privacy and my autonomy. with many different people. And so, in a way, this might sound weird, but I almost prefer having outside care than family member care, just because of the shift in my relationship with my family members, and just kind of wanting to not put so much of my life on, my care on a family member. I prefer putting that on an outside caregiver, because it just helps with all of the stress and challenges that kind of come around navigating the relationship and setting boundaries and different things.
Yeah, so we kind of wanted to include this clip from Chelsea because I could say a million things about my experience, right? But it doesn't really matter if that's not a shared experience among the community. And we really felt like this was a good kind of point that Chelsea made, because it's been my experience as well, living with a disability to the extent that I do, relying on so much help and care from the closest people in my life. It just almost seems inevitable to me to not feel like a burden at times because of the amount of help I need. And it can get to you, to say the least. We have a whole episode on it, so. You want to add anything there, man?
But yeah, it's just that that burden complex could be it could be amplified, especially if it's a family member that you already had that pre-existing relationship with.
Yeah.
And then it's a bit easier to navigate with a stranger, someone that you don't really have that history with or baggage, depending on the family dynamic.
Yeah. I don't want to say you can just boss strangers around, but it's almost a little easier to do so than someone you're close to, because you already have an existing relationship, and that can get entangled, of course, with the fact that they're also helping you, and that changes the relationship in ways that can be unpredictable. So, as Uriel said, it's difficult on both ends, because as a family member or a caretaker, you want to make sure that you're there to help them with what they need, but at the same time, there's boundaries in place that need to be drawn out, and that's on both parties' ends, right, buddy?
I agree.
Cool. So with that being said, that's kind of a really kind of key aspect we felt of navigating your care staff, of your healthcare, right? And I think we're going to go ahead and move into our next little aspect of healthcare, which is maintaining your caretaking. And I think really the word better used here is managing your care, because it's a full-time job. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, I've seen you do it. He actually has a whole spreadsheet on his computer with about 20 agencies.
20 different nursing agencies. The amount of time I spend coordinating my care with my nurse, Uriel, my grandparents, the nursing agency itself, the company that manages my Medi-Cal nursing hours. It's communication with all of these different parties.
And the complication is that I won't be able to work every day necessarily because life and things come up, but it's also the same case with his other nurse, and it create quite a bit of problems, especially if she gets sick, then I have to show up, and then you could get sick, and then I could get sick, and then it creates this chain reaction where you might not receive the care you need.
Right. Yeah, and so just to kind of set up this whole topic, this slide, I think it's important to note that over 3 million Americans rely on in-home caretaking alone, not even in the hospital. And so this kind of, I think, speaks to the fact that this is a nationwide phenomenon. And one of the major issues that I have found within this aspect is specifically state-funded programs, such as Medi-Cal or Medicaid, don't necessarily want to pay overtime. About several months ago, I had a nurse that was working 4 nights a week for me, And all of a sudden I got a call from the agency saying, oh, your nurse can only work 3 nights a week now. We're having to remove one of her shifts from working with you because the way it's scheduled in our system is counted as overtime. And Medi-Cal is not paying for it, therefore the nursing agency was paying out of their own pocket for my nurse to come that 4th night. And they simply, when I spoke with the case manager, she told me, we simply can't afford to do that. You know, we're at the risk of going under. We're at the risk of just having to drop all of our Medi-Cal patients entirely. And I think that's extremely scary because you're talking about millions of people that just lose the care that they need to otherwise stay out of a facility, right? That's the whole point of in-home caretaking, is to increase the quality of life of the patient in question by keeping them in a safe, familiar environment. That's not, you know, a nursing facility. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with facilities, but I think most in the community would agree with the sentiment that they would rather live as independently as possible. Another issue here is there's just straight up a lack of nurses. I've contacted, as Uriel mentioned, several different agencies on that spreadsheet that I have. Out of the 20 I have on my spreadsheet, 2 have been talking to me or willing to work with me. One of them is the one that I currently use to staff my 4 nights or 3 nights a week. The other one that I've been in touch with, they say that they have nurses that they can send here, and then I send them the hours that I need, and I never hear back. So that's been my experience, and I think it speaks to a bigger issue as well. The fact is that, well, according to an analysis by the Health Resources and Services Administration, by the year 2025, there's a projected shortage of 78,610 registered nurses, which I think is maybe the scariest statistic here, because it not only impacts in-home care, but hospital care as well, really across the spectrum or the board of healthcare, employment, right? So, want to add anything there, man?
Yeah, and this is more like California bias, but IHSS is the largest in-home caretaking service in California, and when doing research, other programs do exist, but they're more geared towards the elderly, and because we'll be on the next slide, but another issue is the competitive pay, and the issue is if I were to switch to another program, even though they might pay better, he might qualify for less hours, which could further complicate things, because IHSS at the moment has given us more than enough hours that we need for me to provide the care that he needs.
Right.
So it kind of equals out where, yeah, the pay is less, but there's more hours for potential care.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue to part of that caretaking, managing it, is for most Californians in the disability community that are eligible is dealing with IHSS and managing your care under that. Admittedly, we are going to be a bit California biased here, despite the state of the disabled union. But it really varies by state, the programs that you are eligible for. California, of course, has Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid nationwide, and that varies by state what people are eligible for. And there are several states that have IHSS adjacent programs, but again, there's a lot of variability by state. So we'll be kind of focusing on IHSS here in California for the remainder of this talk. And yeah, as Uriel mentioned, the fact is IHSS just does not offer competitive wages. I have a little screen recording I got here from IHSSadvocates.com with the wages by county for IHSS workers or providers. And it might be a little small, I'm not sure, but I'll play the little clip here. It's all sourced by the California Department of Social Services, these numbers. And there's a lot of 16s. There's a lot of low wage numbers for, albeit an entry-level medical job, right?
Well, the interesting thing about IHSS when I was comparing to other in-home programs is that IHSS allows for paramedical services where I had to be trained and then signed off by a licensed professional to make sure that I can indeed do this and I can take care of you. And other programs, even though they pay more, but they don't really, you won't really know how many hours you qualify for until, bam, here we are. Or, what else? Well, yeah, that's about it. Yeah, like, they might not provide paramedical, like for elderly care, they might not need that.
And again, just to kind of reiterate, there's a lot of variability by a patient, by person. I qualify for the maximum amount of hours under IHSS care for a lot of reasons, those being as well the fact that I have a tracheostomy. You can't see it, but I do have a stomach tube. And of course, need help with all my activities of daily living, as I mentioned earlier. And I think the really scary thing with regards to this topic is the fact that 70% of IHSS workers are family members. And so when you consider this, you consider what we just previously talked about, the patient-caregiver relationship. There's an added element to this, right, buddy? You had mentioned with regard to Chelsea and like what she had mentioned.
Oh, yeah. So 70% of IHSS workers are family members, and that could increase some tensions depending on who's providing the care. One thing that we ran into multiple times was that a lot of the times family members would have to pause their career or change jobs to essentially take care of their family member full-time. And this could provide some financial strain depending on how much they were making prior.
Yeah, financial strain is a good point, because if you look at the average wage across the counties in California, it's about $17.76. It's about what Uriel makes.
Give or take a couple cents, yeah. About.
And it's scary because if you extrapolate this number, this wage, over a year's wage, it's roughly $34,000 that you're making as a IHSS provider. But what really impacts this number is the fact that, again, these are family members, majority are family members providing care for a loved one who is probably not eligible for the max number of hours. I have a friend who lives in Santa Maria, and he has cerebral palsy. He needs help with all of his activities of daily living as well. He doesn't have a trach and a G-tube though, and so he only qualifies for half the hours that I do, I think about 150. And his mom has to work an entire other job on top of providing care for him in order for them to live comfortably. And I think this is a issue that's not just, prevalent among Santa Barbara County or, San Luis Obispo. If it can happen here, it can happen anywhere, is my thought process with it. And so yeah, as you can imagine, finances are a big strain when it comes to finding your care. I have a friend that lives in LA who would pay her caretakers through IHSS an additional $2 out of her pocket just to incentivize workers to come help her, on top of what they're already being paid. And so I think that says a lot about the current state of in-home care, right? So speaking of money, of finances, let's get into some financial aspects.
Now, for you, this is one that we're both pretty passionate about.
Yes.
And probably the most. common issue that we've encountered on this wonderful journey?
Yeah, so to put it bluntly, something that actually jeopardizes my care staff, the ability for me to maintain my care is Social Security, which is odd because you would think that would be the reason I have care at all. So before we kind of jump into everything, we'll kind of go over the basics of SSI versus SSDI. So supplemental security income is, of course, a federal program that pays individuals who live with a disability or who are low income a cash benefit. And the key point that I want to highlight here for the rest of this section is the fact that if you qualify for SSI, you also qualify for Medi-Cal. And this is really important because my life revolves around Medi-Cal. My care is funded by Medi-Cal. Uriel working for me is funded by Medi-Cal. My nursing care is funded by Medi-Cal. My $425,000 spinal injections I receive every 4 months are funded by Medi-Cal.
How much?
$425,000
Only.
every 4 months.
Wow. Why is it so expensive? That's outrageous.
Yeah. So this is a very important thing. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Of course, we also have SSDI, or Social Security Disability Insurance, which is similar in the sense that it's a cash benefit provided to those living with long-term disabilities who either qualify because they used to work or have family members who have worked. And growing up, I have always received both because I'm in a special situation. And those include either being blind or having low vision. There's survivor benefits, which I qualify for because of my father passing away when I was 12. And then there's benefits for children with disabilities, which of course I receive. And then veterans benefits as well. Right? So those are the two aspects of Social Security. We just kind of wanted to run through really quick, but we're going to spend some more time on SSI, again, because it's the most relevant, I think, to this conversation. So there are conditions to being on SSI, of course, and one of those is you must report your income to Social Security, either by using their app, by mailing your pay stubs to their local office, or by dropping them off in the mail. And the way it works is, roughly speaking, for every $2 you earn working, if you report your pay stub to SSI, which is the law, while you're receiving SSI checks, you will, typically speaking, lose $1 for every $2 you earn out of your check. And this isn't so much my beef, this isn't my problem. This is pretty logical to me because it incentivizes those with disabilities to, get out and work and push them to try to earn what they can and make a living for themselves if they're able to. But then you have individuals such as myself and a lot of my friends in the community where we can work, but we need care. We rely on social services for our well-being, for our quality of life. And essentially, the way it works is if you have more than $2,000 in assets or just money in your checking account, you lose eligibility for Medi-Cal, which again pays for nurses, for Uriel, $425,000 injections, gone if I make more than $2,000.
Yeah, when I started working with you and you first showed me this, I'm like, oh, ain't no way. And then you showed it to me, and I'm like, oh, it's insanity. Because I've been working with Dom for quite a while, and he does a lot of work, not only with the Cottage Foundation, but also just on the podcast, and he also works for a radio show. And I'd argue he does just as much work or more than most able-bodied people, but the problem is a lot of it goes unpaid because of this threshold where you just can't have $2,000 sitting at any given time. And I'm like, I thought that was kind of crazy because one of my main concerns is like, how does one plan a life? How does one have an emergency fund, for example?
You just don't. you don't have an emergency fund, you don't get married, because if you get married, the limit is $3,000 as a shared couple. And so, as you can imagine, this strongly discourages those in the disability community from marrying if they rely on Medi-Cal for covering their expenses, their medical expenses. And so at this point, you're probably wondering, the implications. At least that's the way my brain works, and we'll kind of get into these on this next slide here. So you can't save money, as we've already kind of mentioned. You can't go over $2,000 as an individual. It forces you to spend money regularly. You can't save, so therefore you're not saving to buy a vehicle, let alone an accessible vehicle, which costs more than the average for modifications. If I recall correctly, actually in the last talk I gave here, I had mentioned, I think the average cost for a modified van for a wheelchair user is close to 80 grand. And of course there's scholarships available, vocational rehab services can be of help, but again it puts the onus or the burden on the individual with a disability to find these resources. And again, you can't really get married or even cohabitate unless you want to live in poverty. And I've talked to Uriel about this, I've talked to my girlfriend about this, like even the day I want to marry you, I can't, because financially it would be unsound, right? I'd be forced to drop my Medi-Cal, which pays for all of my care. It's this domino effect, right? Another thing you can't save for is housing, let alone, again, accessible housing. According to Michelle Uzetta, who's a staff attorney from the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, in California, about 40% of unhoused individuals are those living with disabilities. And nationwide, that number is 1 in 3. And this is pretty crazy because not only can we not afford housing, but say we can afford housing somehow through either Section 8 or other HUD housing, you have to pay for your accommodations you make in your house. So say I want a roll-in shower because I'm in a wheelchair and the only shower installed has a step, I have to pay out of my pocket to renovate that. And if I so choose to move later on, after having renovated, I have to restore the bathroom, the shower to the previous state that it was in before I moved out. So yeah, it's pretty wild. Another kind of thing we wanted to get into with regard to finances is something called 1619B. And 1619B is a program involved with SSI. If you're on SSI and Medi-Cal, part of the SSI rules called the 1619B work incentive allows you to keep your Medi-Cal coverage. There are stipulations, but this is something I think worth mentioning that's a more on a positive note with regard to this issue. You can maintain your Medi-Cal coverage if you have been eligible for an SSI cash payment for at least 1 month, if you need Medi-Cal to keep working, if you still meet the other requirements for SSI, such as being low unearned income, and of course living with a disability. If you still have resources below that $2,000 limit, $3,000 for couples, and as long as you make less than $58,638 in gross annual wages. So this program is handy, it's helpful if you do want to save some money, but again, it has its limits. As you can see, the $58,000 number, it forces you to be tight with your money, spend it as much as you can, and really make you choose your battles on what you want to save for, I think.
But luckily there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yep.
With our next slide. It's very exciting.
Yeah, something that is really a godsend, I think, for the disability community. And this is a nationwide program. It's called ABLE. If you live with a disability, and if you've lived with one since before the age of 26, you can qualify and sign up for an ABLE account, which is a savings account that is untouchable by Social Security. You can keep up to $100,000 of money in your ABLE account, and it won't be counted against you as a resource, according to Social Security. So as you can imagine, this is a very nice loophole. And I, of course, have an ABLE account. I know a lot of people that do. It's very helpful because, as you can see at the top there, I got those nice little diagrams, those images. You can buy tacos and homes and desks. Now you can buy food. You can buy homes. You can buy expenses related to work, employment, to medical expenses, all with that money that's in that account. And it doesn't count against you.
I don't think it doesn't count against FAFSA either, right?
Right, yeah, that's the cool thing is it doesn't affect anyone's current or future eligibility for needs-based programs such as FAFSA, Medicaid, Medicare, SSDI, vocational rehab services, and there is an $18,000 annual limit, but I still think this is obviously better than nothing, right? Because
Having 18K saved up, collecting interest is better than
if you're
nothing.
able to save $18K a year, so you're doing pretty good, right?
Yeah. What's particularly great about this program is that it gives people like Dominic more independence, where before I was talking about he does a lot of unpaid labor, but with the ABLE account, he could essentially just put, if he looks like he's about to make more than his SSI allowance, he can put it in the ABLE account and just work a regular job like anyone else.
Yeah, and ABLE is really cool because not only can you just put money in yourself, you can also work, and as long as you don't receive a 401k with where you work, you can donate $14,000 or $14,580 of your work, of your earned income into that ABLE account, and other people can donate as well. It's really accessible, and people that have an account can just create like a link, and anybody that wants to can help them out.
And I believe they're changing the age limit from 26 to 46 now.
Yeah, we'll kind of get to that on the next slide, but just to mention before we do that funds invested in an ABLE account, they grow tax-free as well. You can invest your money in your account into several different types of portfolios based on their level of aggression, and you can accrue interest as well in a regular savings account. So bottom line, ABLE accounts are really cool. As Uriel mentioned, they're changing the age limit of having a disability before 26 to 46, starting on the 1st of 2026. And you're eligible, again, to sign up for an ABLE account as long as you're receiving SSI or SSDI, or as long as the physician can vouch for you, essentially, by providing documentation stating that you have a marked and severe functional limitation that began before that age limit. And I think before we wrap up the financial slides here, we wanted to mention something that's really exciting, and that is the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act, which would increase the resource limit for individuals relying on SSI and, of course, Medi-Cal from $2,000 to $10,000, and it would increase it for couples from $3,000 to $20,000. And it would additionally adjust annually for inflation, which we have a lot of going on right now.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. It's like, I see Dominic, he checks it quite regularly. It's like a sporting event. This bill's been floating for about a year now, right?
Yeah, so the catch here is you would think this would get passed ASAP because it's so integral, it's so exciting to the community, but it's been in Congress since last September, and it has not yet moved. Yeah. And this is something that that bothers me a lot. I've emailed my congressman, and I regularly talk about it on the podcast. I post about it. And it's just sad because if this were to be passed, it of course has a lot of positive implications. Those being that it would give people that rely on SSI and Medi-Cal the ability to save money. $10,000 is not a lot, but it's a lot more than $2,000. Especially the difference in the couples limit as well. Additionally, it would, in my opinion, create an actual incentive for those that rely on these social services to work because they have the financial independence to do so. You know, if the difference being, I told Uriel when we were working on this initially, I think the difference being with the way SSI is now, the limits now, and if this were to be passed, is I can work a job right now, but if this were to be passed, I could pursue a career, right? I could build wealth. I could plan for the future. I could save, and I could grow financially, which anybody else can. It's just people that rely on SSI and Medi-Cal that cannot. So that being our spiel about money, let's go on to the final pillar of our talk, which are the social aspects. The National Household Travel Survey of 2022 estimated that 18.6 million Americans aged 5 and older had a self-reported travel-limiting disability. And compared to those reporting no disabilities, people reporting these said travel-limiting disabilities revealed the following in the study. They were less likely to travel, to be employed, or live in a house with a vehicle. They took fewer trips. They cited health problems as being the #1 reason for taking fewer trips. They lived in, typically speaking, lower income households. And finally, they compensated for their disabilities by asking others for rides, or by limiting travel to daytime trips instead of overnight trips, and by using rideshare or special transportation services, such as, say, Dial-A-Ride. And you know, Uriel initially sent me this study, and when I read through it and found all these points and these findings, I was like, whoa, this is kind of scary. Because I think if any person that didn't know better, that wasn't familiar with disability, were to read this study, were to see these findings, they would be influenced to kind of conclude, wow, living with a disability sucks. Like, you must not go out, you must not have fun, you must not go to sporting events, you must not go to amusement parks, because it just seems like you don't, according to the research. And the data is scary, but what I will say is that there's a lot more to the story. Here we have a clip from a friend of ours that was on the podcast, the founder of an app called Friendly Like Me, which is essentially an app akin to Yelp that allows individuals in the disability community to rate businesses based on their accessibility and their accommodations. And so when we spoke with Alicia, we of course asked her a lot of questions about her perspective speaking to business owners and working with those in the disability community. Because the truth is that there are those challenges that we face getting out. And this is what she had to say on the topic.
So I think the most common issues is not understanding. First of all, if you have never seen someone with an access need try to access your space, it's invisible to you. Mm-hmm. Okay? So when I speak with them and I say, okay, so let's just talk about me, right? I look relatively normal to you, right? If I try to sit in that booth over there, I'm going to be really uncomfortable. Watch me do it. And they go and get in, and they immediately feel uncomfortable. They're like, ooh, that's tight, right? Mm-hmm. What I love is that once they see it, they don't unsee it. They can't unsee it, right? And usually that business owner finds a way to make an adjustment. And what I hear a lot is, well, that would cost $100,000, and what I usually follow right back up with is, no, you don't have to replace all those booths, just one. And then train your team. When you see someone with a disability or someone who's plus size, come in, sit them over there. don't try to walk them over to this stupid booth. I mean, you in your chair coming over to that booth, how are you transferring? You're not. You're sitting at the side, right? Is there one place in your restaurant where you can wheel up to the side of a booth and be reasonably comfortable that the people coming in and out of the kitchen aren't going to blow you over?
Right.
All you need is 1 or 2 spots in the restaurant where that works. And so I push back with that. Just make one modification and then tell us about it. Claim your listing, tell people, right? That's really all you have to do. And so that's the kind of the thesis of our work, is that if you know in advance, if you can go, you're much more likely to take part. Going to a baseball game, going to a restaurant, if somebody scheduled a baby shower at that restaurant, if you know if they have an accessible bathroom or not, right, it's going to make the difference. And so we expanded our concept to include really all people with access needs, no matter what they are.
Yeah, I really like this clip from Alicia because it makes you think, based off the data that we just looked at, the survey that was mentioned previously, is it the people that are scared to go out because of the challenges they face? Or is it the environment of which they're going out into that is imposing the actual threat or the source of the fear, right?
One of the topics that was brought up on this episode was that self-fulfilling prophecy, where you're just so used to getting disappointed when you go out that you're less likely to go out. And it's just like, oh, well, why, you know?
Yeah.
And the problem is, well, if you have a disability and you're used to just the world not being quite good for you, you go out less. And if you go out less, then the disability community becomes invisible. So nobody really thinks about them or their accessibility needs, and I think she summarized it pretty well.
Yeah, totally. And again, the more visible that we are, the more that we normalize not only ourselves in public spaces, but the more that we also normalize universal design that's accessible for people, as she said, with all access needs, the more we can kind of improve society. And just to kind of add on to this point, with regards to travel and accessibility, here's a clip we have with our friend Jared. And Jared lives with a spinal cord injury. He's a crossroad athlete. He's a disability advocate, and he's also a content creator. We were fortunate to meet up and link with him before this last Super Bowl, so that was really fun. We got like a go Niners, hey, this is our year.
Funny just because Jared's a big Chiefs fan.
Jared's a big Chiefs fan, I'm a big Niners fan, so yeah, we thought that would be fun. And you know, we got to talk to him about his experiences as a sports fan, going to different events, because he's really active in the community. He goes out to several of his local, cities' sporting events. He's a big Jayhawks fan, he's a big Chiefs fan, he travels a lot, he's just like a go-getter. And so we thought it would be cool to kind of talk to him and get his perspective on getting, I think, like ADA type seats, right, accessible seats at these sporting events. So we had posed the question to him, how difficult or easy is it to find seating in the community when you go out to these events, and this is what he had to say.
Honestly, what I really believe it has done is it's convinced large groups of disabled people that they just can't go to sporting events. And it really, I think that's about the worst thing that could happen. Because I don't want to lie and say that there aren't challenges and that it is frustrating. It's a lot of times, there's games in March or tournament games, or maybe you didn't plan out 4 months ahead that you want to go to a game. Any able-bodied person can get on StubHub, can get on Ticketmaster, find seats. They can, if they don't want to pay very much, they can sit at the top. If they want to pay whatever they want to pay, they can sit wherever they want. Sometimes it doesn't matter if I have unlimited funds, there's nothing available for me. And that pisses me off. I should have right to go and watch a game just like everybody else. And this is really the mountain I'm going to die on, is I deserve to have an opportunity to go where everybody else goes. I deserve to roll my chair onto a plane. I deserve to go to any game that I want to, as long as I can pay what everybody else is paying. And it just pisses me off that I'm just I feel like we're told to just go in your corner and you don't bother us. Yeah. Don't be seen, don't bother us. You're already sucking all our tax money. Get out of my sight. And that's really how I feel sometimes. You gotta get the human element. You gotta find the guy or girl, the person that's in charge of things at the venue. People are great, especially when they see, a guy like me who very clearly needs a power wheelchair and is not trying to take advantage of any type of situation. But, I've had really good luck when I go to the accessibility counter, I'm like, hey, I tried for 3 months to get tickets to this. I could not.
So I really like that clip as well because, you can hear the passion in his voice, right? And he actually provides a solution that you've got to get that human element. And I think that's a really applicable lesson you can take away from this specific clip and apply it to several other aspects that we have. Because if the services in place that we rely on to help us had more of that human element, I would argue that we'd have a lot less problems and a lot less need for talks like this. If the insurance people were more, I don't know what the word is, if they had a little bit more human to them, or cared a little bit more, a little more empathy, there's a better chance, I think, that I get that overtime hour paid for that I need, right? If the, people working in government and Social Security and policies actually had more of an understanding of what it's like to live with a disability and the financial struggles that we face, they might be more encouraged or inclined to fast track that bill being passed into law, right? And so to wrap up here with regard to the social aspects, we're going to go over another study that Uriel found on well-being. And this was a study on loneliness, social support, social isolation, and well-being among working-aged adults, both with and without disabilities. It was a cross-sectional study, meaning that the people who ran the study proposed the same interview questions and surveys to those reporting disabilities and those not reporting disabilities, and compared the results, which concluded that people with disabilities experienced increased loneliness, low perceived social support, and social isolation at significantly higher rates than people without disabilities. Furthermore, disability was associated with, of course, lower well-being, and the prevalence of loneliness was highest among adults with disability who were younger, economically inactive, living in rented or other accommodation, living alone, and with low levels of access to environmental needs. And this specifically bothered me because the first half of this last bullet point is me to a T, right? I'm 25, I live with disability, what many would probably consider economically inactive. But I will be the first to tell you that I don't feel lonely. And when I read stuff like this, I can't help but wonder, it's got to be reported. This has to be reported in a research study for a reason. There's others in my similar circumstances that are reporting that loneliness, that are feeling that social isolation. And so to provide a light to the end of the tunnel, I think, we have a clip here finally from our friend Sophia. Sophia lives with cerebral palsy, and she's also on the autism spectrum disorder. She is a disability justice advocate. She has her Master's of Science from USC in Schooling Administration. And here you'll hear her talk about a little bit of advocacy and the positive implications it can have with those feeling that isolation.
How does being an advocate get to you sometimes? Like you, and this is especially true at the university setting, unfortunately, for many physically disabled students, right? And for many of us, we've only known the reality of what we're the only disabled person, right, in the room, let alone in spaces, right, of any learning environment, right? And so, we have to acknowledge there's some uncomfortable feelings and also awkwardness that comes from being, right, in that position, being like, well, but maybe if I'm an advocate, then I have to, as you said, be very open about, you know, these very personal things.
Yeah, I completely agree with your sentiments here because I think it ties in perfectly with what Alicia said, that we're only going to be seen, we're only going to be heard if we're willing to be open, to put ourselves out there, to struggle in front of other people. Otherwise, we're going to continue to feel that sense of isolation. Others don't know, they don't understand what they can't see or hear. And yeah, do you want to add anything else, buddy? Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, that's kind of the perfect example, I think, of why we're here tonight, giving this talk on the State of the Disabled Union. It's not only to provide information to those who may be unaware, but it's an act of advocacy, and it's an act of, you know, combating that sense of isolation, right? It's an act of combating what that research says, and that's why this talk really kind of means so much to me. So, as we come to a close on the State of the Disabled Union, it's clear that while progress has been made, significant challenges remain regarding healthcare, regarding finances, and regarding social inclusion. And I think what's important to note here is that these aren't just issues for the disability community alone. These are issues that affect society as a whole. We have to continue advocating for accessible, reliable, and quality care that meets the unique standards and needs of everyone across the spectrum of disability. Financially, the disability community often faces barriers that others simply do not. From employment discrimination to helpful yet tedious support systems, we must work towards financial equity, ensuring that everyone is able to, regardless of ability, achieve economic stability and independence, right? Socially, as always, the fight for inclusion and representation continues. True inclusion means a lot more than just physical accessibility, though. It means valuing and amplifying the voices and contributions of those with disabilities in every aspect of life. And as we move forward, let's remember that the strength of our society is really measured by how we treat the most vulnerable members of it. We're only as strong as our weakest link. By improving these key aspects of the disabled experience, I think we can work to build a much more inclusive and just society. So we hope that you all kind of learned something today and can help us bridge that gap in understanding between the disabled and non-disabled experience. Thank you.